So when I told my friends, okay guys, I want to take up psychiatry, उन्होंने कहा तेरे लिए बिल्कुल सही सब्जेक्ट है, तू खुद भी पागल है और तू पागलों का डॉक्टर बनेगा. So this was probably 1983, which is what, a long time back.
Long time.
Calculate, it's a long time back. So when I set up my own practice, there was this misconception that psychiatrist के पास वही जाता है जो पागल होता है. As time went by, what I learned was that if someone has to set up practice, now I have no experience with the government setup, I have been in practice all my life. What I know for a fact, which I have told an innumerable number of children who are doing their M.B.B.S, that if you want to specialize and you want to be certain of success, the field to take up is psychiatry. It's a complete misconception that people do not go to psychiatrists. Today, if you forget psychiatrists, psychologists in Delhi, if you want to seek an appointment with a therapist or a psychotherapist or a counselor, the chances are the therapist will tell you that I have no appointments to give for the next 3 months. Which other specialty will ever say this? Can a cardiologist say, no, I will see you after 3 months? Can a neurologist, a gastroenterologist? No one can, because they are, they're saying, oh, come to me. Psychiatrists, there are psychiatrists who will not give you an appointment. I mean, the top child psychiatrists in Delhi will not give you an appointment for the next 2 to 3 months because they are doing justice to their work. A psychiatrist has to spend a lot of time with the client, agreed. But the inflow is so huge that your very statement or your question becomes invalid. And people are going. Now, what Dr. Vidyasagar experienced a few decades back, I still experience it. There are pangs of envy and jealousy when my friends say, मेरे को उसने अपनी शादी पे बुलाया था, अपने बेटे की शादी पे. मैं कहता हूँ यार, मेरे को तो कोई बुलाता ही नहीं है. मेरे को कोई mall में, if someone meets me at a mall, someone who see me that morning in the clinic, the chances are नजर मोड़ के चले जाएंगे. Because what if the person next to them says, "Kya तूने तो Dr. Chugh को hello बोल दिया." So if he's a psychiatrist, I never knew that he was related to you, so you must be going to him as a patient. So Dr. Vidyasagar was not isolated. Dr. Chugh is in that same boat. So the people who are coming to me might not acknowledge it, that they are coming to me. And this is adults. Adults also, maybe 45, 50 years of age and above. But people who are younger, 25 years of age, 30 years of age, 35, they are proud. Oh, doc, I told my friend that I'm seeing you and can you give an appointment to him or to her and so on. So in the West, it's probably a status symbol to say who the therapist is, who the psychiatrist is that you're visiting. In India, it might not be a status symbol as yet, but enough and more people are
coming forward
as professionals. That is one. The second point, which I definitely want to emphasize upon is, Eshaan right in the beginning said that, the awareness is low here and, people do not seek out mental health professionals or, they do not have the opportunities. I was visiting England some time back, at Heathrow. There are these, these signages which say that the average time that a child in England takes to get an appointment with the NHS, if he or she has a mental health problem, is 291 days. So I felt bad for the children, but it was very reassuring for me. I said, in India, it is much, much better.
Correct.
Of course, one is not talking about, rural India, the villages, the districts which are not, which do not have access to these services. But 291 days is inconceivable. In that time, a child might attempt or contemplate suicide enough and more times. You do not get proper help. There are enough and more problems that can be created. So the point that I'm trying to make here is A, India is not isolated in this. B, the stigma is nothing compared to what it was earlier and definitely much, much less than what people thought then or think now.
Thank you for that, because Eshaan and I were going back and forth on a couple of things like this. But also I wanted to ask you that what do you feel are the most common mental health issues that, appear or surface in adolescents that you're presented with? And are there any in particular that are coming forward, particularly after this Corona times, like which I call the COVIDian era?
what are the usual problems that a psychiatrist would be expected to see? The commonest by far is a combination of depression and anxiety. So we see as much depression and anxiety in the adolescent age group as we see in the adult age group, or as much as we see in the geriatric age group. We are seeing much more of substance use, substances, chemicals, much more. I mean, in my clinic, we test for 23 different drugs.
Wow.
You know, a child who comes to the clinic, some alteration in behavior, something or the other, you take a urine sample, we run a test for 23 different drugs. Why do we test for 23 different drugs? Because we expect to find all 23 different drugs being sold on the streets of India. And,
Wow.
and we are definitely seeing a huge upsurge in the experimentation with chemicals. Adolescence is the age when experimentation is expected. It could be with nicotine, caffeine, that's a very basic level, then alcohol, cannabis, and then these are what are called the soft drugs, and then there are the harder drugs. So this experimentation has gone through the roof. The problem with harder drugs is that even 2 or 3 times of use can make you physically dependent on the chemical. So that is something which has definitely increased a lot. Then adolescence is a period which is marked by a lot of emotional turmoil, and there's a huge amount of flux inside the brain, because the adolescent brain is still an evolving brain. There are parts of the brain which are developing, there are parts of the brain which are not used or not required to be used so much, so there's a lot of pruning going on there. So it's a brain in a stage of development. So if you look only at, let's say, the interpersonal domain or in the context of relationships, I expect to see a lot of relationship linked problems in adolescents. So these, I would say, would be the commonest problems that I as a treating doctor would expect to see. And in these times, what has increased, I would say that there's been an increase to a certain extent in the anxiety and depression. But I personally, though, I mean, people are crying themselves hoarse that it has really gone up and so on and so forth. I personally, in my practice, I have not seen such a significant increase because the numbers were already very high.
And that's
Dr. Datta will have seen enough and more of examples of these problems. Of course, there are so many other problems. I mean, as a psychiatrist, I'm exposed to hundreds of problems, but these, I would say, would be the commonest.
Dr. Datta, the next questions to you, that that during this lockdown, teens did go through a lot of stress. So how do you feel this affected teens, and did any parental groups reach out to you for help with any specific issues?
Yes, indeed. Taking off from where Dr. Chugh left, I fully agree with him. For an illness to be cured, it is important to identify correctly before prescribing, let alone administering a medicine, finding out what is the problem. That is identification of the problem is very important. We need to build up the awareness, and after awareness, we need to have the identification. Of course, doctors have a different way of identification. We do it slightly in a different manner, and I'll talk about it. That is, we have these tests going along with the kids, the TET and the STET, for example. The TET is the thematic perception test, wherein we give them stories to write. In creative writing, there are open-ended stories where they end up with situations which kind of indicate a problem that they are undergoing. And similarly, the situation reaction test, in which they react in a particular manner which is not supposed to be or is normal for a student under normal circumstances. So these two kind of tests that we administer in our English test, and of course, the counselor also deals with these. We identify the problem and what is the degree of the problem. The experts say 1 out of 5 will have emotional issues in adolescence, and but you never can really tell during this period of COVID, where there is a little inhibition and going out as well to the doctors, reaching out to a psychiatrist because of the COVID protocols, because of the social distancing, because of children being kept inside, indoors by the parents compulsorily. Even if a child wants to come out, there are a lot of examples here when I get to interact with these children as they've started to come to school, that they would like to express that they would like to come to school. But the parents say, no, don't go out to the school. And especially with the blended learning coming in, the parents say that what you are getting at home, you're getting the same classes at home. So why go to the school? And why while away your time? Why subject yourself to the risk? So there is this problem of mindset amongst the parents also, due to which we can't actually identify and detect to what degree this problem is there. And then, of course, having detected, we need to have the early interventions, which, of course, depends on the timely identification. So a comprehensive mental health program has been chalked out by the school, in which I say not only the counselor or the special educator should be involved, but every teacher should be a counselor. He or she should be able to identify and thereafter start with the intervention. And in cases of severe cases, it is brought to the notice of the principal that, look, this is what we feel that the child is undergoing this trauma, and we deal it at a different level. The special educator comes in, the counselor, the school counselor comes in, and we deal it differently. Dr. Chugh was talking about resilience. Yes, different children show different degrees of resilience. Some come out of it very easily, while others take a long time, and it continues to reflect on their academic performance. Their grades keep dropping, and when we notice that why are these grades dropping over the period of time, we notice that the child is undergoing some problem, some issue at home. There is this very famous, if I may briefly relate with you, story of Mrs. Thompson, who was finding this Gary, a particular child, as we may name it, his grades dropping over the period, his behavior going astray altogether, him misbehaving all the time. So she used to be scolding him all the time. Then comes the teacher's day, when everyone brings in some cards, every small gifts for the teachers, and this child brings in a small bottle of perfume, which was almost empty. And that is the time the mother realizes that, the teacher realizes that the child has lost his mother. So she wears a bit of that perfume and talks to him nicely. So the child Gary responds to Mrs. Thompson saying, "It is for the first time that you have smelt like my mother." So at times there are issues at home that we do not know that our child is undergoing, and therefore his academic grades are falling, he's unable to perform, he's withdrawn, he's staying at home, and even at home he doesn't come onto the online because he is just withdrawn altogether. So we need to know the background, the problem that the child is facing, and we must make an attempt to find out. There could be bereavements in home, there could be household loss of income, and of course, all the time wearing a mask and social distancing. All of these definitely have an adverse impact on the mind of a child.
Thank you, Dr. Datta. And that was a wonderful statement that every teacher should be a counselor. I think that itself will, have a multifold impact on, the quality and the nature of education. itself. So that's a brilliant thought. And thank you for that. And just you were talking about stresses and things like that. So, there's a lot of like alternative methods to handle stress that they talk about, like Vedic methods or pranayam. I mean, would you be considering any of those?
Well, of course, it is a healthy mind in a healthy body. It is very important for a child to stay healthy. And this excessive screen time is doing a lot of damage. The ophthalmologists, of course, criticize this all the time, but we know they go on to these video games. Therefore, these boys' locker room, things like these happen because they go on to these kind of games, the Blue Whale and the PUBG, and also they should be taken away from all these, and they should be brought into things like fitness of wall squats, planks, jumping jacks, exercises that they can, strengthening exercises that they can do at home. In fact, we had conducted an inter-school competition where they had wall squats and planks and jumping jacks, different kinds of activities by which they could strengthen themselves physically. Yoga, of course, goes a long way in this regard. And then I always recommend the childhood games, the hopscotch, the marbles, the top, which are very important for a child to take him away from the screen. Even snakes and ladders and Ludo and card games are good in this kind of situation where they are locked in the confines of the four walls of home. But hopscotch and marbles and tops, I recommend to all my students. And I relate to them this particular incident. Well, I don't know. Am I audible? Because
yes.
All right. So what I was saying is that I was relating the other day on the sports event when Mr. Kapildev was the chief guest for our centenary sports day. This particular incident that I always remember. He was playing in Australia, and he was standing at a place fielding from where he could see only one wicket, and there was this run-out chance, and he, in his quintessential style, picks up the ball and disturbs the furniture from a distance where he could see only one stump. And the commentator was really surprised to see that he could break the stumps from that distance. And as they would never surrender in their style, he said, the commentator went on to say, for Kapildev, must be playing marbles at home, meaning to say that he must be playing these childhood games, marbles at home. Therefore, he has such a nice aim, and it is a fact. Your hand-eye coordination is improved by all these things. I believe personally these problems are increasing by the day because children are not playing these childhood games that we played while we were kids, the hopscotch, the marble, the top. All these really helped us to have a good hand-eye coordination, unlike the present times when they are mostly on the screen and playing the games like the PUBG and Blue Whale and so many other, in fact, games they play on the screen, which is a kind of interfering with their hand-eye coordination. And it is reflected by more and more problems, which keeps the special educator busy. Apart from the physical fitness, which I strongly believe in, we also promote the creative activities where drawing, painting, and quiz, puzzles, all these things are encouraged. They are taken into nature in a virtual mode. We play out music, we try and play out music of nature, sounds we like to bring from nature because nature has a healing power. So we may not be able to otherwise we take them on tracks. We are unable to take them out in the nature so much. So we create it. I tell my teachers to create these visuals this impression that they are in the nature by showing them videos where they are having a walk in the jungle, and virtual reality makes it happen. They can hear these birds from all around. They're walking in the pathways in the forest, and the sound of water falling, and all this heals their mental health in the present circumstances, where I feel in the confines of the four walls of the home, they are under a lot of stress. Another thing I always promote is that they must have a faith in whichever spirit they believe in. I cite an example of John Borg, when he used to be playing tennis, and after a 5-setter, he would win in the end. He would drop on the knees immediately and raise his hands up, look skyward, and be seen in that posture for a while. Now, somebody asked him, a journalist asked him, well, Mr. Borg, how are you able to keep yourself so cool? You were 2 set down, and how are you able to pull through, come back into the match like that? So he jokingly said, well, I have ice in my stomach. But the fact of the matter is that he believes in some spirit. This is slightly going spiritual, and I am spiritual, not religious. I believe in that spirit that has created this world to be so perfect. Everything in nature is so perfect. Whatever is spoiled by us. So that spirit I believe in very strongly, and I want students also to believe in a force that makes John Borg win, makes him keep his cool. I do write a bit of poetry, and I had written out these lines at one point in time. I worship the stones, and the stones came alive, ready to bless and ready to forgive. So if you have faith, you read out a prayer that gets into your psyche, and it helps you perform in every field, whether it's sports, whether in academics. It gives you a kind of emotional stability. So this is from my practical experience that I'm speaking, that I've been talking to my students over the 3 decades, and it does help them to overcome. Another method of overcoming this is the habit of reading. If they read, they will definitely be out of this trauma, this feel of being crammed up within the confines of 4 walls. And in this regard, I have another little anecdote, a real incident that I would briefly like to share with you. It's about the habit of reading. I was leading, like I was saying, that going out in the nature with the students helps them big time. I was leading a group on a track in Nepal quite some time ago, and we had our rucksacks we had to stay the night in those wood houses and then move on further towards the Gomukh. So we were carrying our rucksacks ourselves, and we were carrying, of course, the basic necessities with us. Nobody likes to carry extra weight. Now, while we were moving as a group, there was a couple, foreigners, they overtook us. They had small satchels with them, smaller than our bags, and they overtook us. There were just 2 of them, and they went ahead to this place in Nepal called Chandanbari, and that was the only place one could have stayed to move next day to Gomukh. So when we all reached there, I looked around, I thought, where's that couple? Where could they have gone? This is the only place where they can stay for the night. When we went for tea in the small hut in front of the wooden hotel, I found them both sitting and quietly reading a book. So what priority they gave to reading was exhibited by them practically. They bothered to carry a book to read on the small satchel, that they were carrying, which they had to carry all the way uphill. So this habit of reading, if the students get into this habit of reading while they're young, it stays with them. It would help them today in the present times to overcome this kind of situation that they are in. and definitely it will help them sail out of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Datta. I mean, screen time is now being viewed like a necessary evil. You need it, but it's, how good or bad it is for you, a lot like education. But we have a lot of questions now from, parent groups and, children about how to also cope with stress. Dr. Chugh, we have thousands of questions with the two of you on the panel. So I'm just trying my best to, bunch them together so that you can address a whole group rather than specific questions. And for everyone watching this, while we are trying to address as many questions as we can, the identity of every person asking a question will be anonymous. And in case any question cannot be addressed due to paucity of time, please write to us. We are going to request Dr. Chugh and Dr. Datta to address those later. But Dr. Chugh, over to you. Stress and anxiety in children. It is a major cause of concern. People are writing specific things. And along with that, I would just like to add that, very often what happens is that parents are, saying that think happy thoughts, think positive thoughts, think motivational thoughts. At what time do we switch from, giving motivational stories to actually seeking professional help in these cases? Over to you.
Okay. I think I'm going to share my screen. It'll help people understand when you talk about this stress and handling of stress. I think it's a very simple diagram which explains a lot of things. Let me see if I can locate it. Okay, can you see it? This thing is something which is called a stress bucket. So there is this bucket, which is the stress bucket, and there are different things which are contributing to the stress, which is, let's say, the water going into the bucket. So on one side, which is the top, you have the causes of stress. At the bottom are some simplistic measures in which we can deal with the stress. When we cannot deal with the stress, your question was, what are the warning signs? That comes once these mechanisms do not work. On the right side is the manifestation of stress. These four things that are written here. So there is this stress bucket. There are various things which are contributing to the stress. What are these various things? Let's see. Financial pressures, which does not apply to a child, but we are talking about stress. There are adults also attending here. So the financial stress is there. If your diet is not good, it is not a balanced diet. There are occupational concerns. In the case of a child, there are worries about academics. There are health concerns. This is specific to COVID and COVID times, like you said, COVIDian times. Then there are family issues, relationship issues, interpersonal issues, which I spoke about earlier, that an adolescent faces a lot of these things. So these are some of the things that contribute to the stress bucket. They fill the bucket. Some of the things that help relieve the stress, the first thing, taking time out for things that you enjoy. It's a very effective stress buster. Practicing mindfulness. Mindfulness is a term which is used to describe a state of focused awareness. If I'm going for a walk in the park, a lot of people are just walking, they have their eyes fixed straight ahead, their blinkers on their eyes. Mindfulness, if you are practicing at that time, you would become aware of the 50 different shades of green in the grass and the leaves and the trees and the plants around you. You become aware of the sounds of the birds. You become aware of the sounds of the crickets in the park, for instance. A lot of people are not living in the immediate moment. They are not living in the present. They're either living in the past, which means they're worried about what they have done and what has happened, or they are living in the future. They're worried about what could possibly happen to them. All of these things cause a buildup of problems.
Another parent just
Sorry?
So another parent was just asking that, while you were talking on it, what can parents do to help their children overcome stress?
Yes, just coming to that. So good time management for a child, for a student, for an adult, planning your day out, not only one day, but generally having plans in mind. Okay, today I'm going to get up at 6 o'clock. This is what I'm going to do. Having a good, healthy schedule to your life is again a very efficient stress buster. And finally, talking to friends and family. Dr. Datta spoke about the importance of teachers being counselors. What is this talking doing? The parent who's asking what they should or what they could possibly be doing to help the children decrease their stress levels. It is to be good listeners. The problems that I see with a lot of adults, it could be parents, it could be teachers, it could be anyone, is that people are impatient. They do not have the time, they do not have the inclination, they do not have the patience to listen to the child. They are in a hurry to pass judgment. The child just wants to talk, you are in a hurry to give solutions. The child does not want that. Maybe just talking is doing a lot to relieve the pressure inside the head. It's like a pressure cooker. If I'm cooking dal in my kitchen, what do? Pressure cooker liya, usme dal dali, pani dala, you put salt, you put kali mirch, lal mirch, haldi, pyaz, tomato. You close the lid, put on the weight, put on the gas. After 2 or 3 minutes, the water starts to boil inside, pressure starts to build up, and CT bajti hai. What is that CT? That extra steam or that extra pressure inside the cooker is let off, and the process of cooking goes on unimpeded, and you have delicious dal which is prepared. But if I am not a good kitchen person, if I have not cleaned my pressure cooker, especially that weight or that safety valve through which the steam goes out, the next time that I try and cook dal in that pressure cooker, I put all those things, dal, pani, pyaz, tomato, blah, 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 put on the gas. Within 2 or 3 minutes, instead of that CT, that whole thing explodes.
Very well said.
Because the safety valve was blocked. I always tell parents, if a child is being brought to me in the clinic, if an adolescent comes, it's a very, very important part of intervention for me to say, I want to interact with the parents also. And this is what I tell the parents, you people don't have time to sit with your kids. There is this really ridiculous concept of quality time which came up some time back. I think quality time is a load of junk. It gives parents an excuse to not spend quantity time with the children. You come back, you say, I brought this. Oh, look, I got this iPhone 13 for you. So promptly the child excited opens the iPhone 13 and he sets it up, blah, 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 and spends the next several days, weeks, months on that. The parents also sitting on their own iPhone 11s or 12s or 13s. There is very, very little interpersonal communication which is taking place, which is not allowing the child's brain to get rid of that pressure. And when that does not happen, these are the manifestations. If you look at the stress bucket, if the stress is below the lowest line, we say the person is relaxed. Koi chinta hi nahi hai, parwah hi nahi hai koi. If the stress level is between these two lines, we say, okay, you have stress, but you're coping well with it. If your stress level keeps escalating and is between the second and the third line, we say, oh, this person is stressed or anxious. So in the second case, the equilibrium was disturbed, you came back. It was disturbed, you came back, so you were coping well. In this third case, your equilibrium is disturbed, there is inadequate resilience, and your equilibrium stays here. Now, when it stays in this position, this is actually what to a psychiatrist is stress or anxiety. When a lot of symptoms start coming up, your sleep starts getting affected, your appetite starts getting affected, your weight starts getting affected, you cannot concentrate, you get irritable, you get angry, you feel tired all the time, you cannot concentrate on your studies, blah, blah, blah. And when the stress level goes above this top line, when you are overwhelmed, that is the equivalent of having a breakdown. And the number of people whose stress levels are, above this, who are, the stress is overflowing or is overwhelming the person. Like I said, maybe half an hour back, psychiatrists are probably the busiest medical practitioners around because stress is an all-pervasive phenomenon. And then to the left of this very interesting picture is this unhelpful coping mechanisms. Oh, I'm feeling so hassled, I can't sleep. Let me take alcohol. My dad drinks, so he will not know. Let me take some gin or vodka out of the bar and I will put water inside the bottle. Or my mom takes a sleeping pill, or I don't even want to take those names here. Or she takes this pill because she can't sleep at night or she's hassled. So you start popping those pills. Or a friend says, you're unnecessarily getting worked up. Why don't you start taking charas or ganja? I mean, that is how this introduction starts. That's how this experimentation starts. And these unhelpful coping mechanisms actually start adding more water to the bucket. For that moment, you might feel that, this is the perfect solution to my problems. Actually, your stress level has just gone up. And this is what we need to work on. When, in spite of these 4 things at the bottom, you cannot handle your stress, you are at this level or you are at this level, where I said that your equilibrium has now come here, that is when you need someone like me. So long as your equilibrium keeps coming back, you definitely don't need to come anywhere close to me or to anyone in my profession.
But, so a parent has just messaged me that, how do I know which line the child is at?
Which what?
Which one of these sections of the bucket, like coping well or becoming stressed or overflowing, because there is no indicator that as such that he can monitor. Or are there any specific indicators for them to monitor?
For me, any behavioral change or any emotional change which comes in the normal functioning level of your child and which stays for a certain length of time is not only an indicator, it's a diagnosis that there is a problem. So if your child was generally a very peace-loving, happy, calm person and suddenly becomes irritable, angry, short-tempered, starts visibly looking anxious, is doing this all the time, he's tapping his feet all the time, he's chewing his nails all the time, cannot speak properly, does not feel like eating, becomes asocial, starts avoiding social interaction, starts talking about negative things. I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. Nothing good ever happens to me, which means a feeling of hopelessness, or everyone else is so much better off than I am, feelings of inferiority or worthlessness. Or there are a lot of children who reach this stage and they say, I give up. There's nothing that I can do. That's a feeling of helplessness. So any of these things are very, very sensitive indicators that now, जो बोलते हैं ना पानी सिर के ऊपर चढ़ गया, तो वो पानी सिर के ऊपर यही है, ये लाइन वो सर है, जब पानी इसके ऊपर चढ़ गया, go to Dr. Chugh.
Right, but that's
because
very well explained.
At that stage, as a parent, you are not going to be able to bring this level down.
True.
And enough I know people have paid the price where either through lack of recognition or denial, ना मेरे बच्चे को तो प्रॉब्लम हो ही नहीं सकती, या हाय साइकाइट्रिस्ट के पास तो पागल ही जाते हैं, मेरा बेटा पागल थोड़ी है. I mean, you have anxiety, you're not mad. You have depression, you're not mad. But if you do not take proper intervention, I mean, the media is full of these case stories of people who had extremely negative thoughts, who have attempted self-harm and so on. It is not that it happened overnight. It's not that one night the child was absolutely fine. The next morning the child said, no, I don't want to live. And the child promptly did something. It never happens that way.
Very well said. Very well said. And, so this is coming to the next part of it, a group of questions really, which is this increase in aggressive behavior. Now, we can apportion it to screen time. We can say being cooped up at home. But there is an overall a group of parents have written about an increase in aggressive behavior. Why do you think it's happening, and what can be done about it at home, and when to come to you?
Parents are the strongest, the biggest, and the most effective role models that a child has. Point number one, we find that aggressive children often come from aggressive homes. If the child is exposed to physical aggressiveness, is exposed to verbal aggressiveness, is exposed to emotional aggressiveness, the child very often will learn that this aggressiveness is a way to cope with my anxieties, with my conflicts, and with my stresses. As opposed to this, a child whose parents are relatively calm, they have a good, healthy relationship, is very, very unlikely to exhibit aggressive behavior. That is one. So to change a child, you need to make sure that you can change yourself. Ideally, if you can look ahead, you need to provide the child an environment which is free of this incompatibility and this disharmony. You cannot expect the child to be something which you yourself are not, because that is what you have taught the child. The second thing is, like in that stress bucket, we said, those strategies right at the bottom, they are very, very effective tools. I mean, anything which controls your irritability, which control your aggressiveness. So irritability, anxiety, tension, these are the fertile soils on which aggressiveness breeds. If we can help the child to become less irritable, less anxious, less fearful, less apprehensive, you are decreasing the chances of aggressiveness in that child. And what is most important is if the parents come to me and say, doc, my wife and I or my husband and I have a wonderful relationship, we've never fought, and still the child is behaving like this, then I would definitely be worried, because then definitely psychiatric intervention would be required.
Oh, okay. And so you had mentioned that aggressive children come from aggressive homes is a thing you've seen. Is there also so there's this question that, is there also genetics? Does it play in it? Like, is it transmissible genetically, or is it a genetic factor?
Excellent question. Again, one of Dr. Chugh's examples coming up. This is a triangle. You can see it. So this is one apex, apex 2, apex 3. All disorders are explainable by this triangle. This is what we call the biopsychosocial model of problems. So at the top is bio or biological. This is the psychological or your personality type, and social is your environment. Everything is biopsychosocially determined. So if there is aggressiveness, I have just spoken about the social component, which is the external environment. But then if you look at the biological component, what is biology? It is actually the internal environment of the individual, which is his genetic makeup. So your genetic makeup will predispose you to being aggressive. Your social component, which is your external environment, also would predispose you to becoming aggressive. And psycho, which is your personality type or your personality makeup, also predisposes you to this. And where all three factors are positive for aggressiveness, the chances are very high that even in the face of small triggers, the reaction that we will see would be completely out of proportion.
Right. My experience, if I may add something to what Dr. Chugh said, I have noticed, of course, the genetic part, I fully go with Dr. Chugh. What I have noticed that the children are quite a lot reflection of their parents. The behavior you can trace back in the parents of the students. Therefore, it is very important. I would also subscribe to the view that you have to practice what you preach. Like Dr. Chugh just said, that just saying the child to be calm, you have to demonstrate that yourself. Because for a child, he is very receptive. There's a line that says that what you are shouts so loud in my ear that I cannot hear what you say. That is, what you show me, what you exhibit is much more important than what you are saying to me. So parents need to practice what they preach. It is purely a reflection of the parents, and it shows in the students. Even in the behavior, I have noticed the parents who are respectful towards the teachers, their kids are respectful to the teachers, as opposed to sometimes you find that there's a complaint from a teacher of a child's misbehavior, and when you meet the parent, you can realize why so. It kinds of transmits, whether genetically or by the behavior that they have been demonstrating, and the student has been subconsciously all the time following it. Therefore, I think personal, social, and the systems, all of them combine into the behavior of the child.
Well put, sir. And that was very wonderfully said, that it shouts so loud I can't hear what you say. But Doc, the next group of questions is to do with childhood depression. That what again, one group of parents is concerned that what can they do at home, and the second is that what about the future? That how quickly can a person get out of it and get back on their life? Because these days, every day is a lot of work. So they don't want to lose a single day under that. So over to you, Dr. Chugh.
Would a parent ask this question if the child had a demonstrable physical problem where an X-ray or an ultrasound or a CAT scan or an MRI would pick it up? They wouldn't. They would say, "Bhagwan, bachche ki zindagi bacha lo, baki padhai to wo karta rahega." The fact of the matter is that today we probably do not have the diagnostic tools available, but in the not so distant future, we are going to have a lot of tools which will demonstrate that if there is a depression in a person, you do this blood test, you do this scan, these are the abnormalities that you will find. So if a child has a depression and I can say, okay, there is this fracture inside the brain, कोई पेरेंट बच्चे के सिर पे नहीं कूदेगा, डॉक्टर के सिर पे नहीं कूदेगा, जी जल्दी ठीक करो, कब ठीक होगा, उसका बाद में क्या होगा? आप कहोगे जी ओके, देयर इज अ फ्रैक्चर, लेट मी पुट अ कास्ट फॉर 3 weeks, 6 weeks, उसके बाद उतरेगा, देन वील डू फिजियोथेरेपी, ब्ला 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 ब्ला. This is a classical example of what I would call societal ignorance. What you see is something which you're willing to accept. What you cannot see is something which you're very, very ready to either be dismissive about or brush under a carpet, which are not solutions for me. If a child has a depression, it is probably as bad a problem as any other physically demonstrable problem that a child can have. If a child develops diabetes, there is an entity called childhood diabetes. Will the parent ever say to a doctor कि इसकी दवाई कब बंद होगी? वो कहेंगे डॉक्टर साहब इंसुलिन इसको लगेगी. We don't mind, let him take insulin throughout his life, but बच्चे की जिंदगी जो है वो ठीक चलनी चाहिए. There are enough and more, illnesses which are probably going to last for a long time, which people and parents are very, very willing to accept. They'll say, oh, why me? Why my child? But once they have come to terms with that, they are willing to do whatever it takes to get the child out of that particular situation. For me, this is also a physical illness. It is not that these problems arise in a vacuum. Today, we do not actually, I've been using the word mind, but we do not use the mind any longer. Professionals like me, they just say these are brain disorders. These are not mental problems. These are brain disorders because there are enough and more circuits inside the brain. We know that in depression, these are the neurological circuits inside the brain which are defective. These are underactive, these are overactive. Enough and more. I see that Dr. Harsh Mahajan is here. He does so much of this work. Today you are imaging these neurological circuits, you are imaging neurological tracts and all to figure out the extent of the problem, to figure out what treatment to give, and then to also figure out whether the treatment is helping the person or not. Which is my answer to your question.
And what about a parent's role here?
If the parents are, at the bottom of that bucket, bottom of that stress bucket, where those were the things that you could practice to keep the stress below the second line. Practically speaking, the role of parents and family is limited to below that second line. The moment you cross that second line, where you reach that stage where you are feeling anxious, or you are anxious or low or sad or depressed, or you are getting overwhelmed, you are wasting time if you try and do it on your own. And Dr. Datta, we used a wonderful saying, practice what you preach. Here, I would say, a stitch in time saves 9.
No, that's really well
said. Prevention is better than the cure. If you can prevent those things from happening, it is much, much better than any cure that could be attempted. But once एक बार उस सर के ऊपर से पानी निकल गया, then accept it.
Absolutely. Well, motivation, I feel, plays a very major role in a child's performance. I believe in this transfer of confidence. and not labeling a child. At times, I mean, there are people who come and say that this student is horrible, is incorrigible, there is nothing he can do right. So what I tell is that you must find him doing something right, catch him doing right. And I believe in transfer of confidence. Motivational talk, pep talk, motivational quote always help. But the transfer of confidence, sitting down with the child and telling him that, look, you can score well on the field. If you can score well on the field, you can score well in academics also. There is no doubt about it. I'll give you an example, again, from my practical experience. We had Mr. Tim Henman, a tennis player, outstanding tennis player, and Goran Ivanisevic visiting our school. And after we played a bit of knock and they demonstrated a bit of their skills on the tennis court, we took them to the riding arena. And we wanted to have a video which is a little interesting, in which we seated Goran on a horseback, and also we wanted Tim Henman to sit on the horseback, and two of them rally the tennis ball from one to another with, of course, their tennis racket. Now, Goran was okay on the horseback, but Tim Henman was very nervous because probably it was for the first time he had sat on a horseback. He was very nervous, almost shivering. We told him, all we want you to do is have a little knock with Goran, and we handed him out a tennis racket. And the moment he had the tennis racket in his hand, suddenly his level of confidence grew. He was more stable on the horse, and he could rally for a while with Goran. Couple of, say, around 4 or 5 minutes, they continued to do that. And while he was doing that, he was not so nervous about being on the horse that he sat for the very first time. So this was, I felt, a glorious example of transfer of confidence, which I try to do for students. This transfer of confidence motivates them and helps them do things that they earlier thought they can't do. If there is a fear of maths, I catch him doing something right. I transfer his confidence from there to the subject where he is not doing well, to say that if you can do well there, you can do well here as well. So I think you talked about motivation. I think that is my style of motivating a child, by transferring his confidence, taking his mind from his weakness to his strength and building upon it.
Well said, sir. Well said. And, so the next group of questions really would, I think, also involve the two of you asking questions to each other. That is to do with bullying. The person doing the bullying is one part. The person getting bullied also needs help. And that some part there overlaps, where parents are mentioning that the aggressive behavior is so much, it is leading to bullying even of the parents. Some children have written in that I'm just told stop being aggressive. I'm not trying to be aggressive, but that is the way everybody sees me as aggressive. So how would you address this, and what would you propose as a solution?
One thing which Dr. Datta said right now, it makes a lot of sense, and I want to talk a bit about it. He spoke about labeling. You're a bad child. You are good for nothing. You are a loser. Blah blah blah. This is the worst thing that a parent can say to a child, which is the trigger for another one of Dr. Chugh's famous examples coming up. Dr. Chugh and his
we enjoyed them.
Dr. Chugh and his kitchen. Let's say, Dr. Datta and Yogi have to come to my house for dinner. So it's a guys only dinner. So we say, okay, you come, we'll cook our dinner. Now we go into the kitchen and we want to, let's say we want to make rajma. So जैसे पुराने जमाने में वो फैरेक्स के डिब्बों में वो काली दाल, पीली दाल, मसूर की दाल, और चने लोबिया राजमा वगैरह डले होते थे. We decided to make rajma. So वहां पे 25 डिब्बे पड़े हुए थे. Now my mother had labeled only 1 or 2 of those dibbas. She forgot to do the rest for some reason. So एक के ऊपर लिखा हुआ था लोबिया, एक के ऊपर लिखा हुआ था चना. So हमने क्या किया कि हमने 23 डिब्बे खोल दिए looking for rajma, and we could not find rajma. And finally we opened कि ऐसे यार पता नहीं क्या चुप का घर है, तो लोबिया खोल के देखो. Amazing that लोबिया का डिब्बा contained rajma. I was that not one of the first 24 boxes that we opened, because there was a label there. It said lobia, so we said, it must have lobia in it. Similarly, when you keep telling a child, you're good for nothing, you are a bad child, you are a loser, you are aggressive. Let's say I have invited some people over for a party, and I have my child who does something, playing with a ball, breaks one vase which is kept in the living room. Now, what I do is I start screaming at the child, you are so horrible, you're such a bad child, you're always doing this. The other 10 guests who are there, they immediately learn that this child is very bad, is horrible, is good for nothing. Because that is the label that I as a parent have put on the child. And after that, whenever they will see that child, the first label would be lobia, 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 whereas actually the child might be rajma. Now, this child also told this almost on a daily basis that you are a loser, you are good for nothing. What does the child see when he or she sees himself or herself in a mirror? Loser, good for nothing, aggressive. Labeling is the worst thing that a parent can do. Okay, a child has broken a vase. The thing to say is, what you have done is bad. You are not a bad child. Okay, you've done something which is bad. I have done enough and more things in my life which are bad. It's not that main doodh ka dhula hu and my child is the child who has discovered how to do bad things. This is the difference. Do not label your children. Talk about the activity, talk about the deed, not about the individual. So if a child, like you said, Yogi, that one child has written that everyone calls me aggressive and all, maybe it started off from here. And then the child's mind said, oh man, if everyone thinks I'm aggressive, then let me be aggressive. Absolutely. It's a very, very distinct possibility. I see it happening all the time. And now if we move from being aggressive to being a bully, for me, all of us have a mirror inside our brains in which we see ourselves, which is what we call self-image. We can call it self-image, we can call it self-concept, we can call it self-esteem. If my self-image is positive, my self-concept is positive, if my self-esteem is high, what does that mean? That I keep myself on a certain pedestal. I keep myself at this pedestal, and if children around me are at slightly lower, slightly higher levels, it does not bother me, I'm happy. But if I am seeing myself at a low pedestal and everyone else around me seems to be on a higher pedestal, it does not go down very well with me. And so to bring myself up to the pedestals of my peer group, to the pedestals on which I see my peer group being, I have to do something where I feel I'm better than they are. So I drag up the pedestal that I find myself on by becoming a bully. So for me, a bully has huge issues with self-esteem, with self-image, with self-concept, with self-confidence. And he's seeking to rebuild these through unhealthy activities. Because for some reason, those healthy activities that he is possibly capable of, they have not done too much for him. This is the bully. Then the victim. If a child allows someone else to bully him or her, he starts putting himself on a lower pedestal. And if I am on a lower pedestal, I may be a very good runner, I may be a very good tennis player, I may be good in maths, I may be good in singing, I may be good in art. But because I'm on a lower pedestal, my mind says, I'm good for nothing. You say, in Hindi, you would say, apne prati heen bhavna aa jati hai. Feelings of inferiority come, the more I am exposed to bullying, the more I tolerate it, the lower my pedestal goes. This is the genesis of aggressiveness, of bullying, and of being a victim. And I'm sure Dr. Datta can
Well,
share.
I'll come in here because this is entering my area of expertise. Why I say this, because I deal children all the time. Have dealt adolescents in the boarding where bullying is a major issue. And that is what prompted me to go for, probably in my PhD study that I did, a component of emotional intelligence. It's all about empathy. It is all about feeling how the other person feels when you do this thing. If the same thing is done to you, how will you feel? The words empathy, I think we somehow, because of so many other subjects we touched, we forgot, is very important here. We talk about sympathy, we talk about empathy. When you put yourself in the other person's shoes, you think, how does it feel? You just try and imagine. That is the way I have counseled the bullies. You did this. If the same thing is done to you, how would you feel? You step into his shoes and see how it feels. Like the line goes, which says, only the wearer knows where the shoe pinches. He says, no, sir, I didn't do anything. I didn't mean to harm. I say, you never realize how when you step on others' toes, there must be definitely, you must think about it, because only the wearer knows where the shoe pinches. You have definitely hurt somebody. If the same thing happens to you, you just said it like this in a joking manner. I'm repeating this phrase because it works with the bullies. If the same thing is done to you, how would you feel? You think it is all right when it is done to others. But when it is done to you, how do you feel about it? Just envisage, just think about it. That is to make the child realize that he has been doing something wrong. So that is how I have been able to cope with, or say encounter this problem of bullying. And the one who's bullied must report, must tell, not that he just quietly bears it. There are suggestion boxes we have for this reason in the schools, where if a child is troubled by another, it should be reported so that intervention, timely intervention can come.
So, thank you. And so there's somebody who's written in that their child has severe mood dysregulation disorder and delayed puberty, has ADHD, anxiety, borderline personality traits. And as a family, they're tired of fighting. So is there an institution in India that caters to the need of such a child?
It's not the kind of question that I would like to answer on an open forum. I mean, this requires full-blown professional assessment and then full-blown professional intervention. I don't want to make a flippant remark.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yes.
And
it's not fair to, in a random fashion, respond to everything. Absolutely.
True.
Fair enough. So coming to the next group of questions, which is to do with, how to handle negative emotions, and how can children be educated and sensitized to them. That's for both of you, because language plays a major role with that, oh, you're angry. Angry is a negative emotion, but you can also ride anger to achieve it. We respond better to a sting than a caress. But there's a lot of negative emotion programming also going on. Is there anything you would like to guide the parents towards that?
If I have 24 hours, I can. It is what I do all the time. But okay, this is something which I want to do anyway today. So I think this is the right time to do it. There is a small animation I want to show. It runs for just about 2 minutes. Very, very relevant to your question. And it will help people understand exactly how the brain functions and how we can bring about change in any aspect of the functioning of the brain. It could be a thinking patterns, it could be our emotional patterns, it could be our behavior patterns. So again, I'm going to do a share of my screen and I'll play this animation. And then what I'll do is I will also send a link so that people can see this animation later. I'll just put it in the chat box. Let me, 1 second. Okay, this is better.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-travelled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep travelling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
This is the key to bringing about any kind of change in our lives. Now, what has been shown here is that everything that we either think or feel or do is essentially a neurological function. These do not exist in a vacuum. They do not arise in a vacuum. The more you do something, the stronger the hardwiring inside your brain, and the more it becomes your second nature or your default nature. Now, what they've shown in this animation is that, let's say I started feeling a certain way and I continue to feel that certain way. It started off as a thin white road. I kept walking down that path over and over again. It started becoming thicker and thicker, broader and broader, and it became second nature for me to feel that way. And one fine day, I realized that, oh, this is a bad road for me. It's an unhealthy road for me. When I decided that this is an unhealthy road for me, I needed to start carving out a new pathway, which was shown as the yellow pathway or the yellow road in that animation. So initially, it started off as a very thin footpath kind of thing. You start forcing yourself to walk on that yellow footpath. It becomes a slightly bigger road. It becomes a village road, a town road, a city road, becomes a highway, becomes an expressway. And one day you reach a stage where your second nature is now this yellow path. And at the same time, as we saw in the animation, the white road has disappeared completely. And there is a saying in English, I've learned from Dr. Datta, that it's good to use sayings. If you don't use it, you lose it. So you stop thinking in certain ways. I mean, you try to stop thinking in certain ways, eventually you lose those thought patterns. You try and stop feeling certain ways, you will lose those patterns. You stop behaving in certain ways, you will lose those patterns, which is how habits change. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm pasting the link here, and people who are interested, what they can do is, give me a second. What they can do is they can, whenever they want to, whenever they have time, they can just click on this link. It's a YouTube link. And, if understanding it was slightly difficult, the language, then like Netflix and Amazon Prime have taught us, you can put on the subtitles and they do the job for you. So this is the link. It's something which I would recommend very, very highly to everyone. I mean, today, I've learned about neuroplasticity only in the last 5 or 6 years. Today, my entire practice is based on the applications of the principles of neuroplasticity. You can change whatever you want.
Positive disposition, yes, definitely makes one hell of a difference. And moving on from the subject of bullying, I think if a bully starts thinking positively, he doesn't remain a bully. So somewhere scientific thinking also I bring in briefly, as I believe it contributes towards positive thinking. The superstition and such thoughts are kind of negativity. And when you start thinking scientifically, then you get more and more positive. That's another dimension of it. But generally speaking, it is how you look at things. Two people look at the same thing and would see different things altogether. A person might say that, oh, rose bushes have thorns. And another person says these thorny bushes have roses. So how you look at those things, are you looking at the thorns in your life or are you looking at the roses? I think we need to train our students, adolescents, to look at roses, to think of things that are positive. And having a good thought for others, for your peer group, for your batchmates, for everyone around you helps yourself. Having an ill feeling, sometimes too much of competition also that is thrust upon students also leads to negativity. Because it is when you have an ill feeling for somebody, it is like burning your own house to kill a rat, which should not be there. You should have good feeling about everyone, or think about everybody's well-being, and that is how your mental health improves. We have programs where the children go out and distribute medicines, and they go out and give out food to the poor and help the needy. They are having Ask to Mask, a campaign where distributing masks to the needy, giving out food to the hungry. These things kind of, it's more for your own self than for the ones that you are giving out to, because it helps towards your well-being. It has that positivity about you. So when you give out, I always tell my students, remember this, when you are giving out, distributing food, distributing medicines, it is definitely for them. They thank you, look at the smile, you have made them happy, but it is benefiting you more because it is bringing in positivity. The gratifying feel that we get is leaving us as a gainer, and it kind of propagates positivity all around. So I think positivity goes a long, long way. It motivates one. If one looks at a difficult situation and thinks of it positively, one more example, if I may give, the famous Bruce Lee had one leg shorter than the other, but he practiced so much to overcome that. When he used to dance before his performance, he would move. It was like a dance. It was so graceful. People thought it was his style, wherein if you notice carefully, you can notice that there is one leg slightly higher than the other, but he overcame that with his positivity, with the kind of self-motivation that he must have had, how he pushed himself. He created a wonder. His deficiency, he transformed into a strength. So positivity, I think, goes a long way and create wonders in not only your own life, but in the lives of all the people that surround you.
Well said. Well said.
So I think we've come to an end. I know the three of you are very, very busy, and on behalf of Team MERADOC, it's been such an honor and privilege to have the three of you spare so much time for us. Thank you, Dr. Datta. Thank you, Dr. Chugh. Thank you, Mr. Suri. We've had over 3,000 registrations, and thousands of questions, and it's being watched by tens of thousands of people across multiple platforms. For all the participants, it's not possible to answer all your questions, but we would request you, if you have any further questions, you could go on meradoc.com and send us your questions, and we'll request the panelists to maybe address your questions at a later time. So we at MERADOC, to help and provide assistance to people in this tough time, have decided to provide free online unlimited consultations with general practitioners and doctors 24/7. So in case any of you want to avail of this, you can just go to meradoc.com, register yourself, and get access to doctors for free 24/7. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Chugh. Thank you so much, Dr. Datta. Thank you so much, Mr. Suri, for doing this. We'd also like to thank our partners, NewsX, Masosa, the Heart Care Foundation of India, Medically Speaking, and IPE Global. It was an absolute pleasure having you three gentlemen here today with us. And I've learned a lot. And I'm sure thousands of people have gained a lot and have learned a lot over the last 1.5 odd hours.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chugh.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Datta. Thank you, Yogi.
Thank you, Dr. Chugh. It was indeed enlightening. Thank you, Mr. Suri.
Thank you, Dr. Chugh. Thank you, Dr. Datta. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.